Hey, what's going on, folks? Welcome to part 2 of week 1. So, now that we've gotten the problem and the possibility out of the way, what we're trying to accomplish here by automating our business is, and it comes to as pertaining to knowing our clients, knowing our audience, what are the rules of engagement? I touched on this briefly in the first video, and we're going to dive into a little bit more detail here. Rule number 1, meet them where they are. Right, that's a big one. We see this all the time as we're training people. If you're training people in sales, if you're doing anything like that, this is something that comes up a lot, especially with new people, is we often, I shouldn't say neglect, but we often forget the fact that not everybody shares the same experiences as us. Not everybody has gotten the reps in, has gotten the experience in to get to the mindset that we're at when we're approaching them. So the first thing is we got to really not necessarily dumb ourselves down, but we got to back ourselves up. We got to back ourselves up, and we got to talk to them. We got to meet them where they are when they're there. And that just makes the process so much more simple, so much more effective, and so much more efficient across the board. It's like if you have kids, right? If you got a 5-year-old, if you got a 7-year-old, well, you can't exactly talk to them like you would one of your friends. They're just not going to understand. You got to meet them on the level that they're at. If you're a stay-at-home parent, I mean, it's kind of the opposite. Sometimes you get so used to being around the kids that when you're around adults, you almost forget how to be an adult, right? It happens. It's just life. That's just part of what it is. So one of the constant things that we're going to have to work on and that people struggle with is meeting the prospects where they are. That's absolutely huge. It goes a long way. Meeting them on their terms. Meeting them on their terms is a big one, right? We have so many different methods and means of communication. That's not to say that one is better than the rest or one is more effective. It all comes back to knowing your audience, right? If you're dealing with the 55-year-old plus market, well, chances are, Facebook might be effective, but in terms of communicating with them through email, text message, stuff like that, might not be the most effective way. Not everybody's going to want to come across a landing page. Not everybody's going to want to talk to a chatbot. So the more entry points that you have in your system for people to get a hold of you, in order for people to start getting indoctrinated, for lack of a better word, into your product, service, or experience, changing their frame, changing their mindset, you want to meet them on their terms and meet them where they are. You want to speak their language. Right? The way that you talk to a construction trades person is going to be a lot different than you talk to a C-level executive. It's just that simple. So the more defined that you have your audience, the more that you're going to be able to show that the more you're going to be able to build that trust, that authority, that respect, and demonstrate your knowledge. There's number 4 is don't be an all-in-one. Generalist. Don't be a generalist. Right? That one is huge. Often, a lot of the times that we're trying to set up automated sequences, a lot of the time that we're trying to set up our systems, I see this a lot, is that people are too general. They're too broad. Generalizing doesn't work. That goes back to my analogy of casting a very big net into an ocean and hoping that some sort of a fish gets stuck in it. Well, you may get fish stuck in it. You're going to also get a lot of stuff that you don't want in there. That's simple. So the more specific, the more hyper-focused, the more hyper-targeted that you can be, the more effective your systems are going to be at the end of the day. It's just that simple, right? So don't be a generalist. Meet them where they are. Meet them on their terms. Speak their language. You want separate systems for everything. So what I want you to do is I want you to pick just one direction for now. We're gonna get one funnel, or whatever you want to call it. We're gonna get one pipeline running, and then it can be duplicated into the rest. Every audience, every product, every service, every experience, everything that you have on the go should have its own separate system. It's going to have its own language. It's going to have its own philosophy. It's going to have its own sequence. It's going to have its own workflow. I can't emphasize that enough, right? That's like, to be truly effective, everything needs to be broken down. If you launch an ad and you're like, okay, well, here's five different options. People are going to get confused. They're going to get overloaded. They're going to be bombarded. They're not going to make a decision. They're not going to know what decision to make. So say you have 3 different products. Each specific product should have its own specific build and only focus on that one mentality, that one modality, and lead people down the path. Trust me, that's the most effective and the most efficient way to get things done. You could try being a generalist if you want and trying to bunch everything in all in one, but you're just going to be ripping out your hair and end up looking like me at the end of the day. I mean, it's not such a bad thing. I'm a good looking guy, right? But you don't want to be like that. The next thing that we want to keep in mind is always be testing. That one is huge. Testing, measuring, and tracking. When it comes to sales, when it comes to marketing, any sort of those positions, there's always, I never understood this when I first got into the biz, but once I correlated the impact that it made on my business, it really changed the game for me. Is always be measuring and always be tracking. It's impossible to know what's working and what's not unless you're keeping tabs on everything, unless you're tracking it, unless you're measuring it, quantifying it. If you find that there's a certain step in the process where people are getting lost, you can take it out. Maybe there's a word that's not resonating with your audience, a word track that's not resonating with your audience, right? You're not going to know unless you're measuring and tracking. And when you find that spot that's not working, you can make a couple changes to it and rerun it, see where it goes from there. Next, number 7, is you want to be tailoring what you're doing to your audience. Tailor the assets and material constantly. And that goes right back to point number 1 of meeting them where they are. Without tailoring everything that you're doing, without tailoring your script, without knowing your audience inside and out, you can't. It's impossible to meet them where they are. It's impossible to tailor your assets and your material to your audience. And that's going to render everything that you're doing, all the effort, all the work that you've put in, ineffective. We've all been there. We've all done that. It doesn't matter how long you've been in the game. It's going to happen to us all. Sometimes we could have an idea, we could have a path, we could have everything laid out. We think it's going to work. We think it's going to be so great. And we fall on our face. That's okay, because we already have the skeletons. We already have the frame built out. We don't necessarily have to go all the way back to the drawing board. But we can start right at the beginning. Okay, what do I need to do? We can start at step one. Are we going to look at step one? What's working? What's not? Build on what's working. What's working, eventually, you're going to start seeing more and more and more people moving over to step two. And again, you just duplicate the process. What's working? What's not? Again, step three. Just repeat the process, right? Wash, rinse, and repeat. But without testing, without measuring, and without tracking, it's going to be pretty impossible to know exactly where things are falling apart and where things are working. If you're having multiple directions for people to go, they're going to get lost, they're going to get confused. It's just not going to work. 8, the big one, you're going to hear me beat this one up quite a bit. Tell them what to do. People want to be told what to do. They like to be told what to do. If you're guiding them through the process, meeting them where they are, but you don't give them a next step, nothing else will matter. That's it. So to recap everything real quick, meet them where they are. Meet them on their terms. Speak their language. Don't be a generalist. Separate your systems. Pick one starting point, one direction, one thing that you want to solve first, and focus on that. Perfect it, and then move on. Always be testing, measuring, and tracking what you're doing. Otherwise, you're not going to know what's resonating with the audience. And things can get very frustrating very quickly. Tailor your assets and your material to your audience. You're not going to know how to tailor everything to your audience if you don't have that understanding of your audience. So you want to dive deep. You want to dive as deep as possible. You want to figure out their age range. If income is relevant, you want to figure out income. You want to figure out what types of careers they have, where they're working, family life. Do they have kids? Are they single? Do they have pets? All of this stuff, the more detailed, the deeper that you can dive, the easier it's going to be to set up all of this material. The easier it's going to be to set up your videos, your content, everything else that needs to be set up in order for this to be effective. It's that simple. Not only that, but if you're going to go the route of running ads, or you're going to be going to offline events, such as conventions, the more that you have this established, the more effective you're going to be, because the more that you have your audience pinpointed, the more you have that bullseye sorted out, the easier it's going to be for you to find them, the easier it's going to be for you to attract them, and the easier it's going to be for you to retain them. If they're going down the line, and somewhere down the line, the message stops resonating with them, whether it's something to do with your messaging or something going on in their lives outside of you, again, they're going to be gone. That's it. That's it. Now, we'll get into it a bit later. There's stuff that you can do to try and recapture that attention. There's going to be ways that you could set up your messaging to try and recapture that attention, but it's easier to just not lose it to begin with. And the only way you're not going to lose it is by meeting them where they are, speaking in their language, on their terms, and being very specific about the problem that you're going to solve. So I want you guys to take a step back, pull out a pen, pull out your paper, and start thinking about your audience. Start thinking about your client. If you already have an established book of business, think, okay, well, what are my ABC clients? What types of characteristics do my A clients have? What do I like about my B clients? What don't I like about my C clients? And you can get very specific and very clear on what you want and very specific and clear on what you don't want. And you can start putting this document together. The more ammo that you have, the better off you're going to be. The easier everything is going to be for you at the end of the day. I guarantee it. It's not much I guarantee, but the more pinpoint. The other thing to remember, some of you may be sitting there going, well, I already know my audience. I've already got this done. Well, you know what? I'm very proud of you, and that is bloody awesome. But I want you to do it again. Because our target audiences are what we're looking for. This is literally a living, breathing organism, right? It's going to be constantly changing as we go throughout our businesses, as we're growing, as we're scaling. We're going to be what we want, what we look for in clients is constantly going to be changing. So this isn't something that's like chiseled in stone since the dawn of time, and you got to live under the gun by this document for the rest of your business life. No, it doesn't work like that. It's going to be constantly evolving as your business evolves. But the more clear you can be right now, the more focused and the more directional that you can be. The farther down the line that you go, the more you can tailor it, the more you can adjust, the more you can course correct. And that's not going to happen unless you're measuring, tracking, testing, and quantifying what you're actually doing. So that's it. That's all for this segment. Like I said, I want you guys to start thinking about your ideal client. You can survey your top clients. You can reach out to them. You can ask them for help. You can get to know them better. You can do cold market surveys with Google Sheets or Outgrow or any number of things, SurveyMonkey, whatever the case may be. There's all sorts of ways that you can do your diligence on your target audience. But I want you to, at the very least, start planting the seed before the next segment and start thinking and start painting that picture, start setting up that frame. So that's going to help you when we get into part 3. So we will chat soon, and I will see you guys on the other side. Cheers.